Welcome to the Mental Roots podcast. It's me, Nathan Day. And as you know already, if you've been listening, this podcast is all about just talking about mental health and how it affects us young black guys, especially in Britain, but talking about it in a very relaxed way where we just delve into all sorts of things that happen in our lives that lead to our mental health states. So it's mental health is a very broad topic, and especially as young black people, there's all sorts of factors affecting that. So I'm just speaking with different people like me who have their experiences to share, and of course any tips from their experience or their knowledge that can help us progress in our mental health. But this is mainly a podcast I've started because of a project I'm working on. Shout out to Rural Media and the new creative scheme they do. I'm working on a short animated film that is exploring this topic. And it's an animation because I'm an animator, graduated from the University of Derby, staying there for masters. So yeah, animation's my passion, and kind of I'm channeling that sort of interest to communicate to you guys how we can overcome mental health issues in our community. So today I've got my spoken word mentor for the project, Sipho. Sipho, sorry, you're going to have to help me with your last name because I don't want to mess it up.
So the name is Sipho Eric Indlovu, or Sipho actually, if you want to get real technical, for the Southern Africans. Okay. Yeah, man. You're doing well so far with my name, so all good.
Okay, thank you. Wait, say your last name again. I want to practice.
Of course, Indlovu.
Ndlovu.
Okay, yeah, not bad, yeah. Indlovu.
Indlovu. Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So do you want to briefly describe what you do to the listeners, who you are, and briefly like how we got into contact with each other?
Of course, yeah. Hello, everybody. Hello to the listeners. Welcome. You're going to enjoy the podcast. I definitely have. So feeling very privileged to actually be here. In terms of myself, I have a background as a performance artist and a writer and workshop facilitator. I trained as an actor, but I'd always grown up loving words. And rhythm as well, because that had an impact for me personally. So from acting, while simultaneously practicing poetry, writing and performing spoken word poetry as well. But then have a background as a dancer. My family is just filled with dancers. So that was always a part of my journey and my practice, because physically and what you're trying to say with your body, whilst at the same time trying to speak vocally. So that came into play as well. And I just learned so much from that. So, put that into writing in terms of my perspective. So that came out not only as poetry, articles. And then with all of that, I found myself in, community centers and schools. And that's where the facilitator aspect, I guess, came up. And so that's me. Then I do some other stuff as well.
Yeah, like me, you're very multi-stranded, which is what I like. I like seeing creatives delve into different practice, but not only delving into different practice, but merging those different practices together. So I think you've kind of done that before, which we'll get into later, in terms of some of the sort of short films that you've done. But yeah, let's just start off with your life story. What was life growing up? Firstly, were you born in the UK? Were you born outside the UK? And just, your experience as a young black boy growing up, I guess.
Yeah, man. So I was born in Zimbabwe. I then soon after moved to South Africa. And I lived in South Africa for a majority of my childhood. And then I came over to the UK when I was 9 years old. And, that just exposed me to a lot of contrast to what I had experienced back in Africa. As you can imagine, my skin color, or for me, my experience, my skin color when I came to the UK became very like evident. I didn't know so much about what it means to be black in comparison to other races, because of course there's mention of it and you recognize it. Or I had when I was being schooled, for example, in South Africa, and I had teachers who were white. I can see the differences when I come to the UK, and you're like, oh, by the way, depending on your color, will mean that you have to talk a certain way. You have to walk a certain way. You can do this, you can't do that. And I'm really young at this point, and I'm like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. Because all of a sudden I'm cool in the area that I'm living in, because there's not many other black people there. And or the white people are like, yep, he's black, so he has to be cool. Oh, I bet he can rap. Oh, I bet he can run fast. Yeah. So very, very interesting right from the jump, really.
That's interesting. Let's briefly get into kind of, do you remember what it was like to be in South Africa compared to being in Britain in terms of the racial relations? Because I'm not sure how many white people you came across in South Africa, but maybe just let's briefly compare and contrast, I guess, the racial dynamics that you experienced between sort of South Africa and Britain.
Yeah, that's an amazing question, because it really makes me think about the differences, but the similarities as well with the dynamics. And, happy to start with the similarities, in that depending on your skin color, it will connote a certain privilege, and it will make a majority of people think that, if you are white or if you are lighter skinned, you will definitely have more opportunities, and you're smarter and you're wealthier. And I was sent in South Africa, and it's the same thing. Like in the UK, as soon as I touched down, everything that was assumed of me and was being celebrated was nothing about having a genuine effect to society, because being a rapper and being an athlete, it wasn't anything that was taken seriously for me, and I was encouraged to do all of that by my white friends and teachers, but no one would push me towards going to university, or to exploring academic paths, exploring sciences. It's like, why was I not allowed to contribute to the world in that way? So that was really, really interesting. But then, I guess like the other dynamics. So I lived I'm in Johannesburg, in South Africa. Many people know it as Joburg, and there's obviously a majority black community there in comparison to white people, for example. And that energy there of not only having black people, but having black people of different tribes, speaking different languages, was amazing, because there's differences just immediately there. But it's almost what brings everybody together, fortunately, but also unfortunately, maybe, is the skin color. Because it's like, okay, all of these black people, then some of these white people, and you sort of know where you would rather be, for sake of you and your family. So really, really interesting.
And just out of interest, what was the reason, like, you moved to England with your family? What was your parents' kind of, or I guess maybe it was the common reason for a lot of Africans, where you want better chances of education for your children, and maybe for some people who migrate, obviously, or for many people who migrate, it might be because of some level of political or social unrest. So was it a mixture of those things for your family? Is it something you've talked to your parents about?
So, to my understanding, having spoken to my parents, and what I remember as well, we initially moved because of a job opportunity that my father was offered. So my father did a few jumps. He worked in South Africa, had a job offer to Scotland. That job took him from Scotland to London, and then London, and then to Wolverhampton.
Okay.
And then my mum, who'd been educated in a British boarding school that was
Oh
based
wow.
in Zimbabwe. She had, I guess, a perception, and she had trusted, I guess, at the UK and what it might be able to offer for her children. So my dad was getting these opportunities, and he was gone, and me, my mom, and my younger brother at that point was still in South Africa. Because my parents had that conversation, and it was like, if we're going to do this, then we're gonna go all the way out. And that's what sort of moved us over, I guess, just my dad getting a job opportunity.
Okay. Well, already that defies kind of some of the negative stereotypes of why people think people move countries.
Tell me about
oh, was it to escape this? And no, my dad just got a promotion in it. So, So no, that's nice to hear. That's nice to hear. And I think, it's nice to hear more stories like that, you know. So yeah, I mean, just out of interest, like what sort of professions did your parents have, and did that kind of have an influence on the ambitions that you had as well? So we're kind of more now delving into your creative journey and how kind of what were your first memories in terms of finding what you were good at artistically, and is this something that was initially encouraged in the family? Let's just start delving into that.
Yeah, let's do it. So the dad was a barman, you know, and a bartender, for the a Hilton hotel in South Africa. And he'd worked there for a few years, and the tips were amazing. This is why I remember. Because he'd worked there for so long, he'd seen some regular guests and international guests that were coming in and out. And, you know, like he's always given me tips, funny enough, growing up, that he had learned. So, for example, if you are a bartender, it's important to remember the regulars' drink orders. And little did I know what he was teaching me about here was networking, you know, because when some clients that were traveling from Scotland, from the UK, from America, all over the world, he'd remember their the drink orders. And there was one particular guy that my dad just won over, basically. And this guy basically poached him and was like, "You're great at your job. I think you should come and manage a Mahou bar for me in Scotland." And that was where things sort of started with my dad. And both my parents at that point were both working like in hospitality. So my mom was always interested in like also in waitressing, but then chefing as well, and wanted to work towards becoming a chef. So that's where sort of things started. Hospitality, I guess. And that sort of continued up until now, you know, many years later. And then, like, in terms of for me, when I first discovered my own interest. So as you may hear for some of the listeners, I might have a stammer. So I was considered mute up until I was 5 years old, because I didn't speak till I was 5.
Similar with me, actually. I had a speech impediment problem, and I think it was until about 4 or 5 years old, similar to you, that you know, I struggled speaking. I needed speech therapy in my nursery years and reception. Was it the same for you? Did you also need therapy?
That's really interesting. I mean, I guess I needed it, but I never had it.
Okay. Yeah. I had to have that extra support, and it's funny how now we're both, you know, poets and really using the English language, you know. So yeah, that's amazing. But carry on.
No, it's like a brilliant, like ironic and irony, really. But so, you know, like I don't know if this is why, but I was always observant from when I was young. You know, I have some really vivid memories from between, like, when I was born and up until I was 5, when we were traveling between Zimbabwe and South Africa, and I just remember journeys. I remember some conversations. I remember words, and I don't know if it was because I didn't talk as much, that brought in a lot of attention, and so I was just aware of it. But anyway, it made me really observe, and the reason I say all of that was because I was really aware of what was going on in my house when aunties and uncles and friends of the family were coming in. And I was being exposed to music. You know, there was always music in the house. It was reggae that all my parents and all their friends were playing. Apparently, they've been playing it since the 70s. I'm like, whoa, okay. It was, I'm like, the early hip hop as well. So it's Tupac around that time. Then there was a lot of Southern African music and house. Nice. So not only am I hearing it and seeing it, but people are dancing to it all the times. You know, nice. Christmas, birthday parties, and it's quite overwhelming because I'm just seeing this like constantly. But as I was sort of growing up, you know, like I was 8 years old. When we talk about encouragement, and when I started sort of like being artistic, wasn't encouraged. While it was an introduction to hip hop when I was 8 years old, when my mom bought me an Eminem album, which was the Eminem Show. If anyone has an 8-year-old son and wants to buy them the album, really inappropriate, by the way, but it might change their life because it did. Interestingly, even though I was exposed to hip hop beforehand, that album was really my first introduction, and I've just fallen in love with hip hop. But then what starts to happen is that that's the first album where I'm rapping and I'm humming along to the lyrics. But what's happening, Nathan, is that as I'm doing that, something is feeling really different within my chest and my head. And because what happens is that whenever I stammer whenever I'm talking normally, even now, my chest and what feels like my mind sort of like contract, you know, they come together. But when I was rapping those Eminem lyrics, everything was loose. There was something about the musicality. I was really free. And so I actually started to employ those rhythmic techniques in my everyday speech. And that became a way of me actually being able to communicate without stammering and having fun with it. Wow. And that was, you know, the beginning of this rhythmic exploration and poetry. And then I was like, let me write this down. And that was the beginning. And then lots of things came after that.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, especially from an artistic point, because even as we're going to delve into mental health now and kind of, I guess a lot of what you're going to say in regards to your mental health growing up will be in retrospect. So maybe at the time you wouldn't have been aware, but I think this is good because a huge part of this podcast is also looking at the arts and the role that arts have to play in, especially for us Black people, in terms of processing our emotions. And, you know, even like for you, it was a way that actually helped you to communicate better. And that's quite powerful because a lot of people might see hip hop as, you know, they just see the negative aspects of it, which is fair enough. You know, there's hip hop has its flaws, just like a lot of cultures have their flaws, you know, because every culture is made of flawed people, isn't it? So, but I've learned to appreciate the art form of hip hop and the good that it does for communities and, you know, all sorts of Black people from all sorts of backgrounds, whether they're migrating to the UK or they're born in the UK. You know, there's something about hip hop that resonates with everyone. And it's really a freedom of speech that it promotes, you know. Exactly. So I resonate with that on a deep level. Although I never had like secular hip hop albums in my house. I think the only CD we had, because I grew up in a very Christian household, so I don't know if it was the same for you.
I know like it might not sound like it, but I did.
So I mean, the only CDs we really had at home were just gospel ones, really, or just all types of Christian songs. Some songs were from Ghanaian artists. My family's from Ghana, so it's a mixture of various cultures, but all having the same sort of message of Jesus and everything. But I had there was just one compilation CD of Christian hip hop artists that we had. And at the time, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, when I was enjoying it, or maybe I was even 5, I remember enjoying the CD, but I didn't listen to any of the lyrics. I didn't know it was Christian hip hop. Yeah, it was like I remember the rhythms and kind of some of the lyrics as well. But similar for me, hip hop. It's funny because obviously, in terms of the lifestyle the rappers were talking about, in terms of mainstream secular hip hop, I didn't relate to it, but it was the escapism. It's the, seeing people who look like me flourishing, which was interesting because even then, as a small child, like obviously race wasn't something I thought about, but I could tell that I looked different from most of my friends and that the way I grew up was very different. I remember I had a mixed race friend and he came to my flat one day but this was back when we used to live in Clapham Park in South London.
Okay.
And I had a friend come over and, I remember we had rice and stew. I don't know if you know about rice and stew.
Oh yeah.
And I remember my friend saying, I think he didn't want the stew, and I was surprised. I was like, wow, how can you not like the stew? And he just had rice and mayonnaise, and I was like, what? Who does that? Ooh. So that was a turning point for me in terms of my exposure to my friends from other sort of backgrounds. I was like, that's boring. How can you just have, how some, I don't mean to stereotype, but how some white people, they seem okay with just having rice, or they have rice with butter on it, and it's like, where's the flavor in that, man? Come on. And the funny thing as well, my friend used to say, can I have some plantain as well, please?
Wow.
Plantain. Have you heard someone say plantain before?
I know I know there's debate between like plantain and plantain.
Yeah. Well, in Ghana we say plantain.
Oh, plantain. Okay.
Plantain, yeah. So that was quite funny. But there were just little moments like that in growing up. I was like, okay, I am quite different.
Yeah.
But yeah, hip hop gave me a sense of belonging, and like it wasn't until I was in my teenage years in secondary school that I realized actually there's a Christian alternative, and that these Christian rap artists are actually really good. So now that's kind of what I'm passionate about. Is I've joined a community of Christian hip hop artists. We've got a WhatsApp group chat now, and I feel like I'm part of the UK. I'm keeping an eye on the UK scene in terms of Christian hip hop artists, and I think we're starting to get our names out there a bit more. And it's funny because now I'm saying because that just shows how much I feel connected to the group.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what I'm on now. But anyway, back to you. And in terms of mental health, what was that sort of experience like growing up for you?
That's it's really interesting. Just type with what we were talking about with hip hop and Christian hip hop artists. I think they really all feed into mental health. When life is supposed to be simple, you grow up in a normal family. You play out as a kid. You know who you are. You know what you're going to do next. And if ever you mess up, there's always going to be the guidance to support you. Then at the end of the day, you're going to live a happy life. You're going to get your house, your car, everything's going to be blessed. But I guess, what happens with a lot of young people, and there might be some crucial years, like that 15 or just a little bit younger, just a little bit older, where things get really serious, So when you are a young, so like in my experience as a young Black boy in Britain, it doesn't end there, because I am a Christian and not everyone around me is a Christian. So I have to operate within that space. I love hip hop and rap, but I'm a Christian again. Should I? Because that's what it glorifies. And so then there's the Christian hip hop art, and I'm like, that's
sorry, just out of interest, just to set the context. Did you ever, like, do you remember when you gave your life to Jesus, or is it kind of something where, for as long as you remember, you've always believed in Jesus, and it's just been a gradual journey? because that's what it's been like for me. I can't remember the exact moment I gave my life to Jesus, but there's definitely, I guess, standout moments in my journey growing up as a Christian where I came to more of a maturity in terms of what it means to follow him. So, what was that like? Just to set the context, because I feel like your faith might have something to do with it.
Yeah, no, my faith has absolutely everything to do with my whole life, and everything I can remember, I can see a reference to God there. And even now, it's a big step for me. So yeah, I've grown up in the church, grown up in many churches. But both my parents come from quite big families. I believe my mom has either like 6 or 7 siblings. Then my dad has about maybe 12 siblings, so something crazy like that. And when we lived in South Africa, lots of family members are around. And what I remember is that my parents would take me to one church, and the following Sunday, one auntie's taking me to another church, and the following one, another auntie's taking me to a different church, and all the aunties are baptizing me as well. That they're all getting me baptized. What is going on here? So I've been baptized like 3 times, not with that consent, of course, but no, in terms of for me personally, because I was really young back then, so I'm under the age of 5, just over the age of 5, so 6, 7, all of that. But no, for me, I do remember, we come to the UK. For me, when I'm 9 years old, I remember I'm 14 years old, and we're still going to church every Sunday. We've recently gone to a Catholic church as well. We're trying that. I remember I'm 14 years old. I'm in year 10. I am going, lunch has just finished. I'm going to the classroom, and something just almost clicked in my mind, and almost had this epiphany, this perspective, and I just knew in that moment that I'm not alone. Everything, as in everything all throughout the rest of my life is going to be okay. And it was just this big moment, and it's almost it's something that I'd always known, but at this point it was clarified and it was confirmed, which is obviously a big part of the Christian faith. You walk with faith, it gets confirmed, and you're okay, now I know why I should have trusted you all along, God. I'm gonna do this again and again. So that was a big moment, because that was really personal to me, that no one else was around. And then, since then, obviously, the family still attending church, and obviously not at the moment due to lockdown. But yeah, so that was a big moment for me personally, and I've continued on my walk with Jesus Christ.
Awesome. So now, let's delve into the mental health. Were there any difficult moments in your life where, in retrospect, you can see that your mental health was suffering? What were the things causing those pressures, and how did you get through those issues as well? I imagine, because with mental health, and I've kind of looked into this already with my you might have seen my conversation with Paul Kazadi and RT Hines. I don't know if you listened to that, but that was quite a powerful conversation we had in terms of, even within the church, the popular experiences of navigating mental health, and how a lot of the time we hear about church members over spiritualizing things and saying, "Oh, just pray about it." Again, and especially in many, African families where we're coming from backgrounds where we might not be privy to the practical ways of dealing with mental health issues. It's easy in our families to just say, "Oh, just pray about it," or we rebuke that demon or whatever. I'm afraid that is the end of this part of this interview. Stay tuned for the next part of the interview in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Peace.